Dear listeners, good morning and welcome to Comme d'Archi, the podcast that opens the doors to the fascinating world of architecture. For newcomers, let me introduce myself. I'm the spokesperson of Anne-Charlotte Despons, PhD in History of Architecture, published author, head of a communication and development agency based in Paris, France, dedicated to architecture. Let's meet every week to discuss culture and architecture with specialists and learn how to look at projects through a context and diversity lens. Thank you for being with me today, and now it's time for talent.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Hi everybody, good afternoon, Gary Shelley.
Hello, good afternoon.
I'm very honored to welcome you to the Comme d'Archi podcast with Laure Cheung, your collaborator. Good afternoon, Laure.
Good afternoon, Anne-Charlotte.
Thank you for being here today. We are in connection, Gary in your London office, me and Laure in Paris, thanks to the sound engineering of Julien Rebourg. Gary, you are one of the principals of the Casson Mann agency in London. First, would you present your office and tell us more about the history of Casson Mann? Would you give us some news of the two founders, Dinah Casson and Roger Mann?
Yep, hi. Yes, so Roger and Dinah set up the office about 30 years ago. They're interior designers. We're an office of interior designers. And I think some of the first projects they had were, retail design and sort of office design. But then they had a project to do with the V&A, with the Victoria and Albert Museum. And slowly from projects like that, they started to specialise in museum and exhibition design. We still do interior design, but most of our work now exists in the museum and exhibition design field. I guess to add to that, Dinah's now retired, and Roger has taken over as the main director, and then we have 4 other directors, such as myself, with Roger.
Okay. And what was your background and how did you get into this iconic agency?
Well, my background is from a design education, so I did a degree in design and then a master's in design, specialising in interior design. And I think I graduated in England. I graduated in Manchester just in time for the really big recession about 20 years ago. There was sort of no work in the UK, so I went abroad and worked in Taiwan for a Chinese architectural practice. Just practicing, I was doing interior design, I was doing garden design, and a bit of architecture. And it was on returning back to London, one of the first jobs that I had was with an exhibition design company. Utilised my interior skills really. And I've, for now over 20 years, I've been working in museum and exhibition design.
Mm-hmm. I love this new question. Do you feel today that you have accomplished what you imagined when you left school?
Wow, well that's interesting. I think when I was at school, I always loved being in the art room, in the art department, and always wanted to do something in the arts, but didn't know quite what because I didn't quite understand interior design. Then when I was studying design, I always wanted to work in a field where I was doing new contemporary design, but working in a kind of historic context. So I think sort of museum design and exhibition design is almost the perfect fit for that. I love the whole kind of idea of building narratives and working with objects and working with architecture, but creating an interior. So, it is almost the perfect fit, yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, could you explain emblematic projects of the office and your own projects inside?
Well, I guess one of the first emblematic projects of Casson Mann was the British galleries at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which were about 3,000 square metres of gallery space dealing with the decorative arts in Britain in, I think, sort of 17th, or maybe it started in the 15th century up to about the 19th century. And I mean, that won lots of awards. It won lots of notice. It got Casson Mann noticed. There was, some radical things in it for the time, like there was audio-visual mixed in with objects, which at that period was fairly a radical thing to do in a traditional museum. I think the next big project that got Casson Mann noticed was the Churchill War Rooms, which was a biographical space about Winston Churchill. And here, multimedia or digital media was used much more extensively and really dictated the sort of style and pace of the gallery. And again, that won lots of awards. And from that, we've sort of built this sort of foundation of being able to take on projects that have a mix of objects and multimedia and different sorts of media, and sort of gel them together into a sort of cohesive narrative. I guess the particular projects that I've worked on, I did the that's Hollywood costume at the Victoria and Albert Museum is one project, and that was an interesting project from the point of view of, I guess at the Victoria and Albert Museum, you can more or less guarantee that every object you might display might be beautiful. And a lot of their exhibitions are based on the beauty of the objects, whereas this particular exhibition, none of the objects were beautiful. They were clothes that were used in film, and they kind of didn't make much sense on their own. So we again used a lot of digital media to sort of put the character back into the clothes and create and make a story and make sense really of this collection. From a museum that was at first reticent for using multimedia, this was more or less a complete multimedia show. It was and it proved to be very popular at the time. I guess at the same time I was working on that, I started working on La Cité du Vin with Laure in Bordeaux. And so that was a 5-year project, more or less full time because of the scale of it. That was great to start from being in a place where there was nothing, there was no building, to having not only a building, but a sort of a 3,000 square meter exhibition narrative about wine and man. And I've also worked on the Natural History Museum, the hanging of the whale in the main space of the Natural History Museum in London. And I generally work around the office as well. I help out on concept ideas and pitches. So we just don't sort of fence ourselves off into one particular project. We take responsibility for individual projects, but we still work across the board and sort of help each other out if and when necessary on other projects.
Could you explain how you win some project in France?
La Cité du Vin was the first, and I mean it was a surprise to us that we won it, to be quite honest. It was an open competition, and I guess it was a competition that was anonymous as well. But for the idea of English designers designing a project about wine in France, we thought that it was completely unlikely that that we would get this project. I think we probably had a very good translator that disguised the fact that we were maybe English for our documents, but. This idea of level competitions, I think, helps us quite a lot, and it was just a project, I think, that really appealed to us. We'd started working on a few projects like it, this idea of projects that are about ideas rather than about collections, about museum collections, and we had been exploring a few projects along that line that we hadn't won, and then when the one came up in France, we put a lot of effort into it, and I think that there was a certain thinking and and sort of way we were designing that I think appealed to the client. And I think a couple of those things that appealed to clients in France was how we were working with the architects and how we were working with the architecture, and that there was a synthesis between us and the architects. I think the other thing that might have appealed was just the fun that we had with it, that we really, imaginatively really went for it, and I think that's how we won that project.
Certainly, English people are the best wine lovers all over the world.
Yes, we got the reputation of being one of the biggest import markets for wine, I think. Yeah, and I think also historically, I guess the relationship between the UK or Britain and Bordeaux, there's a historic relationship there that goes back to, Richard the Lionheart, the Plantagenets and trade from then on.
Good. And what is the main differences between the interior design and the scenography?
I think how we work is, as interior designers, I think we're very particular about materiality and form, and we pay a close attention to that. And say like at La Cité du Vin, we tried to make forms that were representative of each of the subjects that we were exploring, each of the subjects that we were presenting, and those forms have, it's just not a shape that you see, it's a texture that you touch, it's the materials that you can see that it's made from, but then it's also the media and how the media works in that particular piece of furniture or that particular space that I think distinguishes, one of our projects, that you have this synthesis of, object, space, furniture, material and media, all to try and harness this all these tools in the service of the narrative and the idea that needs to be communicated to the public.
And one of the main challenge, if I have to add to this project, is that needs to be 20 module that we design that should all looks different, with different approach and different visitor experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard not to run out of energy on some of those meetings that you would get, day 2 of the meeting and you're still only on module 11 or something. And you think, well, I've got another, but I think it was, the difference of each module. I guess the fun we had with it, there's sometimes a lot of humor in our work. And I think that sort of helps with communication, to the public.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are the main differences between the English and French working methods?
Yes, well, I mean, the main difference for us is that we're a kind of medium-sized office, and as far as I understand in France, I don't think there's sorts of an office that's our size. You either get quite small offices or you get quite large offices. And so when we are often competing against other French companies, they seem to be often groups of co-contractors. They would put a group of individuals together, whereas we're actually an office of 20 and 20 people that have worked together for a long time. And we feel we have quite a lot of creative capital and a sort of synthesis of the way that we work together. I think, that's one of the differences. I think when actually on the ground working on projects in France, I think there's a difference in the amount of trust and the amount of responsibility you get as a designer in France compared to maybe the UK. I think in the UK they structure projects slightly differently, that clients hire project managers and they hire cost consultants that are all work for the client, and they kind of, as a designer, you have to report to them, whereas often in the projects in France we've been in control of that ourselves, and so so I think those are sorts of differences. I think when we work as a groupment with some of our colleagues in France, we work as co-contractors, so lighting design, graphic design, structural design, engineering are our co-contractors, whereas in England, those contractors would be subcontractors. So sort of in the UK, you would take responsibility as the lead designer for all your other subcontractors, whereas in France, it's more of a collaboration. So, both projects both ways of working have their good points and bad points. It's just interesting that those sort of slight differences.
Okay. And is there a country where you have felt real barriers in your work?
Well, I don't know, actually. I'd like to think there isn't. I mean, we've, I think to us it's a surprise, but it's a very nice surprise that we get on very well in France. That we seem to like work. We like working there, and clients like our work. I don't think in any of the other countries that we've worked in, we've had such a surprising rapport with, with the country that we work in. And, it's not like we feel that we're French or anything. We still feel sometimes very British when we're in France. But that's, in some ways, doesn't stop us. It's still, there's some things that we don't understand about contracts, scenarios and things in France, but it still is. And Laure's obviously there, she helps us out tremendously on that sort of front. But I think I don't think we've worked in other countries as successfully as we work in France. There seems to be something there, some mysterious factor that maybe we shouldn't look too deeply into.
I think
but it is great.
There might be a barrier about languages, but languages is not a real barrier. And I have to add that creativity for us, there's no barrier at all. It's not limited with countries.
I think when we started La Cité du Vin, I think I was using Google Translate. I think the client thought we were complete idiots. It was, I think it's just working with clients and client having trust in you and being completely open, and working in an open, collaborative way, which is what we like doing.
Open discussion as well.
Yeah.
What is the most amazing in your work?
The most amazing aspect of our work, or of working in the job, or the most amazing bit of work that we've done? I mean, I think, the most amazing aspect of being an exhibition and museum designer is working with the sort of museums, with clients that have these stories to tell, and you getting a behind the scenes sort of privileged journey into those stories. So when you're in a museum and you're seeing back of house and you see the collections in the collection stores, and you're talking direct to curators that have all this knowledge, and they're talking back to you, and you're pushing ideas around. And, when you're working in fantastic buildings that you get to go into them, and you go, up into the ceiling of Westminster Abbey, or, there's, these amazing spaces that you get access to that the public don't get access to. And, and say something like Cité du Vin, the research that we did for that with the client, visiting chateaux, visiting wine makers, all those sorts of behind the scenes things are, some days you think, wow, this, you pinch yourself that you're having such a great day that, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like just an amazing honor. So I think that's definitely the good side of our career path, really. It's something I enjoy.
And also meeting all passionate people telling all the story.
Do you have a funny story for us?
My God.
You've not been prepared for this question, right?
No, I'm not prepared for that question. I think, I'm not sure, to be quite honest. I mean, I do think, I look back on before we, when we first started Cité du Vin, and how, slightly naive we were about the way that we could work in France. And, I sometimes think that's funny, but it could have been a disaster, I suppose. But it wasn't. Luckily, we've got Laure helping us, working with us. So, I can't think of a particularly funny story. I mean, it's quite a tricky one, isn't it?
What is the atmosphere in your beautiful office and the organization of the team?
Well, I think the sort of atmosphere, I think when you work with designers, from the junior designer up to the senior designer, everyone takes responsibility for their work, don't they? It's not like sometimes other offices where you have to really, you don't have to police anything. People, designers love designing, and they love, sort of generally love working at the design. So just to be among people that are all pushing and working hard is nice. We don't have a sort of strict hierarchy in the office, that everyone tends to do a bit of everything. If you took, say, Roger, for example, who's the big director, he tends to make a lot of models. He must be the highest paid model maker in anybody's office. But but it's one of the tools of communication that he uses. He enjoys doing them, and they help projects along. So it's not like the junior makes the models and the director directs. Often things are other way around, and so we don't stand on hierarchy. We work by collaboration, and I think everyone's working hard, but everyone's also hopefully enjoying themselves, and that tends to be the atmosphere.
Okay, thank you. What is your feeling about the scenography in the future because of the frugality subject on sustainable design too?
All right. I guess there is going to be a post-COVID world, but museums are going to have to face this and still move forward. So there will still be projects. How they're structured, they might be a little bit less money for them, I'm not sure. But if you look in different countries, there are different sorts of projects. There are, new amazing ideas popping up all the time. So I think life will go on. Hopefully, as you mentioned sustainability. This is obviously crucial to what we do. There's so many different ways to be more sustainable, and we all take notice of this. So new projects will still always be there on the cards. I think looking hopefully. If anything, lockdown has proved people are desperate to go and do things, and you can only do so much on screen and at home, and people want to get out and do real things, see real objects, be in real spaces, mix with other people, and museums are perfect for that, really.
What advice would you give to design students today?
Oh gosh.
Designer-scenography students.
Yes, I mean there aren't necessarily specific scenographic courses. I don't think there might be one in the UK, but generally, we take on interior design students, and for us, it's always talking to students that have understood an idea and followed it through, to the biggest conclusion that they can take it, and if they can explain it back to you, so it's always about trying to understand what you're doing, and then doing it with passion. So and then the next best thing they can do is try and make some contacts in design agencies and get interviews and get some work. I think when I left my degree, I didn't really have much of a clue what I wanted to do or how to do it. It was only really after doing an MA that I felt, a much stronger bond with design and a clearer idea of what design was. So sometimes to students I say, stay being a student, because it's, the more you learn, the better.
So, anything else? The last word?
The last word? I'm not sure.
Your future project all over the world?
Oh, right. Oh, good. Yes. Yeah, that's... so we've got... we're working on 2 projects in France at the moment. One is the Maritime Museum in Paris. So that opens next year, is it? Finished?
2022.
22, yeah.
Yep.
We have a project in Champagne, which is more or less finished now, that should open this summer. So they're exciting. There's also, I'm working on the new Holocaust galleries at the Imperial War Museum in London. So they should be open this year. So, there's a lot of exciting stuff that we're doing. We're obviously looking for more exciting stuff to do. And, looking potentially for other countries to do it in. Brexit potentially isn't helping us much. But pre-Brexit, it was always so easy. Now it might be slightly more difficult, but we're trying to face that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And we are probably looking for more projects in France then.
In France, definitely.
Many, many thanks, Gary and Laure, for your confidence. I wish you the best and for your beautiful office. Bye-bye, everybody, and see you next Wednesday for our new Comme d'Archi in English. Take care of yourself. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to tune in to our previous content on Instagram at Comme d'Archi Podcast. If you like it, make sure to promote the podcast by giving it 5 stars on Apple Podcast and adding a comment, or on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And don't forget to subscribe and listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.